I spent 4 years building a village. Then I realized I'm building on land that didn't belong to me. I was building this village for my son. I need to say something first that took me a long time to say out loud. I was wrong. Not about loving my son, not about wanting him supported, not about any of the feeling underneath it, but about the methods, about the pressure, about what I decided other people owed us, and the ways I went about collecting. Some background. My son Elliot is 17. He's autistic, nonverbal, requires consistent care and specific routines and people who understand how he processes the world. He has made enormous progress in the last 3 years, and I am proud of that progress every single day. But the earlier years were survival mode, and survival mode has a way of warping your judgment about what's reasonable to ask of the people around you. I grew up in a family where aunts and uncles were extensions of the parenting structure. Cousins stayed at each other's houses. Caregiving was distributed without anyone having to ask. I thought that was just how families worked until I married into one where it wasn't. My brother-in-law had set clear limits before I even arrived in the picture. He'd help within specific boundaries and not beyond them. My sister-in-law was similar. I heard those limits and filed them under temporary because I was certain that once they really knew Elliot, once they understood what we were living with, the limits would expand. They didn't. The limits stayed exactly where they'd been placed. I spent years interpreting that as a failure of love rather than a maintenance of self. I joined online groups for parents in our situation. Those groups became the water I swam in, validating, immediate, full of people who understood the exhaustion in a way that most of our social world didn't. They also, I now understand, had a specific gravity that pulled everything toward grievance. Every boundary a family member set became evidence of abandonment. Every absent aunt or uncle was proof of something broken. I started seeing my brother-in-law through that lens, and once I started, I couldn't stop. The Disneyland conversation was when he left. I asked him to take Elliot with his teenage cousin when he'd already told me, clearly, repeatedly, that outings without a parent were outside what he'd agreed to. When Auntie said no, I blew up. I said things I meant and things I didn't mean, and some things that were true but had no business being said the way I said them. He hugged Elliot. He hugged my husband. Then he told us not to contact him anymore. My husband came and sat next to me after he left, and he didn't say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, he said he'd been waiting for this for 3 years, that he'd known it was coming, that he'd been watching me push and watching his brother hold and watching the distance between them grow and hadn't known how to stop it. He said he loved me. He also said he thought I needed to hear something true. He told me that his brother had attended nearly every monthly family lunch, driven 90 minutes in LA traffic to watch Elliot once or twice a month for years, offered to help with wills and future planning and care facility research, that he'd done all of this consistently and without complaint, and that I had responded to every act of genuine care by treating it as instant and sufficient evidence and pushing for more. My husband said he'd tried to tell the therapy groups this, and they told him his brother was in denial. He said he thought the therapy group was wrong. I sat with that for several weeks. I didn't argue it, I just sat with it. The thing about survival mode is that it makes you a very efficient machine for identifying what's missing. You get so good at locating the gap between what you have and what you need that you stop being able to see what's actually in front of you. My brother-in-law was in front of me for 4 years. I saw the gap where I wanted more of him, and I kept pushing toward it, and I lost what was actually there. Elliot is doing well. The respite care workers have been extraordinary, patient and skilled, and genuinely fond of him in ways that used to seem impossible to me before I admitted I needed to look for them. He had a meltdown last month, and one of the staff calmed him down in 11 minutes. I cried in the parking lot afterward, not from sadness, but from the specific relief of realizing the village doesn't have to be built from blood. It just has to be built. My husband and I are still in therapy. I'm working on the difference between advocating for my son and conscripting other people into his care. They feel the same from inside survival mode. They are not the same thing. I don't know if my brother-in-law will ever come back into our lives. I've thought about reaching out. I haven't yet, because I think what I'd be reaching for is absolution, and that's not something I've earned. What I can do is stop. Stop pushing. Stop framing every limit as evidence of something lacking. Stop building on land that doesn't belong to me and calling it a village. Elliot doesn't need that kind of village. Neither do I.